How do you turn this thing on? There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. You are watching or listening to Two Wizards and a Mic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So, this week, as we approach the holidays and as we approach 8 more days of a certain Kickstarter that we will talk about, uh, things are slowing down. People are getting more relaxed because they're thinking about all taking some time off and stuff. And what better time of the year to start playing D&D than the holidays? So get out there and support the Kickstarter. Andrew, what are we talking about today?
Shane, well, the first thing I should say is we have quick news about our last Kickstarter. Really good news, which is
Excellent.
it took a while for us to finally get news about the printed version of the Monsters of the Dungeon, but we finally have news. The printed proof is printed and has been mailed, and it's on the way to the office. So as long as that's all good, then we can start shipping, which will probably be right after the holidays. So that's really good news.
Very
As far
cool.
as as far as today, we're looking at the current Kickstarter and we're looking at what makes this world of Mirror special, what makes it unique, original, and the Kickstarter right now, as you said, we've been going for about a week. We have 8 days left. And today was a really good day. We moved up from about 77% funded to right now we're at 88%. And we're very close. We're only like 1200 US away from opening up the first stretch goal so we can see what it is and how far we have to go and what other things we can add to this book.
What would happen if this first stretch goal was hit on day 8 at the 11th hour? Would you extend the Kickstarter?
Would we extend the Kickstarter?
Like if you hit one stretch goal, it's like, oh, we're so close to the next one. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's allowed. I thought it would
I
be a question people might probably
yeah, I
ask.
don't think no, you can't do that because you have to give your date of when you want your target by at the beginning, and you have to stick to that.
All right,
Um,
cool.
however, we have in the past when we've been really close, we have included stretch goals that we've been really close to. Yeah, we have done that in the past. But I'm hoping this first one we can get relatively soon because we have at least five and we could have more than that. Yeah. So today we're going to
Hope
look
we
at,
get there.
sorry?
I hope we get there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna do my Chris Rose voice. So, what makes Mir unique? Why would I want to invest in this Kickstarter? What is it about this world that makes it so cool that it needs to exist?
Well, let me
That was
tell
the
you, I
worst
can
voice
think of
ever.
many reasons, but the first one is that this is a very unusual setting because that saying that one man, one person can change a world. In this world, one really has. And this legendary wizard named Oswald Myrr, who later had the world named after him, he has changed everything. He experimented with magic. And what that did was that created these rift gates, these portals, which now people and creatures can travel around the multiverse and the world with. Although they're not all stabilized yet, and it's not like there's doorways, and oh, I can choose that one and go there, no problem, and I know where it is. It's more complicated. Although a game master could make it so they're stable, and so he's made these, and that's changed everything because dangerous monsters have arrived. Different people can travel to different parts of the world, and a curse came through um, with these portals that has also affected time and space. So sometimes the
Interesting.
climate and the seismic, the seismology of the area has also been affected. Sometimes people even just disappear and then reappear.
Which I know as a player, I have experienced that myself, where we have had characters that were suddenly there, and I think probably the scariest thing was walking into a room with a portal, and a large creature was on the other side, and the portal was just in the process of closing, and that was unnerving. I gotta say, I think we were only level 2 or 3 at the time, but yeah, it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, so these portals really have changed everything. Oswald's changed everything. He has a very long story. We've started to highlight some of that in the updates and in the preview booklet, which you can look at on the Kickstarter page. And we'll put all the links obviously below. The other thing that's happened is that one of the unique things is that you've got 9 worlds really in one, because the 9 continents in the world have been separated by basically this incredibly dangerous ocean or oceans and monsters. So there weren't many people sailing back and forth from continent to continent, very few at all. So because of that, these 9 continents have really grown up and evolved separately. And now the Rift Gates are having these different groups of people and factions and monsters meet, many for the first time. So you've really, when you get Myrr, you've got 9 worlds really in one, not just one setting.
Right. Which is actually very cool because you have I mean, a lot of. I mean, actually, I'll compare it to like something like Skyrim, or not necessarily Skyrim, but a lot of those kinds of games where you have all these different biomes that are jammed together into a fairly small area,
Right, right.
and they usually are done fairly well and stuff like that. But in video game land, they spend a lot of time doing that. But
Yeah,
in D&D, I like having very distinct places to go that have their own cultures, which is more, uh, I guess, akin to like the Middle Earth kind of world building and storytelling, where you have a particular area that's icy, a particular area that's fairly temperate. Then you have the seasons in those areas, and then you have the people further to the south who are very sort of desert dwelling kind of individuals and stuff like that, which uh, Mir kind of has that in each, as you said, each continent has its own kind of, like, I think of, is it Mazan, or is it might be Mazan, who I think of as kind of a desert one. No, what is the desert one?
Genos.
A Genos. And so basically you have like Australia in the southern part of the world, so which I kind of like. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I personally, I don't like those settings or worlds where everything is jammed really close together and it doesn't really make sense of why these things are so close to each other. So that's one of the reasons that I made a whole world, and that the story is that they've been separated. And really, if you look at it, the 5 central continents, like Zog, Mir, Nairn, Mazan, and Galen, are all quite similar. The most different one it being Mazan, because it's even more mountainous and there's volcanoes. So, but in general, those 5 are quite similar, and that makes up actually the bulk of the world and the bulk of where most humanoids, humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, halflings, where most of those creatures live. That's the bulk of the world and the more inhabitable part of the world.
right,
But the extremes are there, but they're not the same. Like you mentioned, Genos. There's very few people living there, very few humanoids, even creatures actually. And Tyrannos as well, the jungle world, not as many humanoids as well. And then the same with the other extreme with Norvold in the north and Voth. Um, in fact, only one of those 4 continents has humans, and there's not that many, especially compared to the rest of the world. So we tried to make a world that made sense, and that also, like, you have these unique worlds. Um, but in terms of the terrain and the climate, 5 of them, the central ones, are fairly similar. Again, we wanted to have something that felt more real, and then you also have a lot of variety.
now, when you were putting this world together initially, what drove you to have it so that the not only did they have oceans in between them,
Right.
but you made them dangerous oceans because I know that in the adventures I've played so far in Mirror, I don't actually recall too many times where I think we had one adventure where we were sailors and we were on a ship and we traveled around, but we didn't travel around a whole lot in that particular adventure. But if we had turned left or right and
Right,
gone south or east west, what was sort of the impetus for that when you were putting it together? That if you get in a boat and travel there, you're
right.
going to have a bad time.
Yeah. Well, I think more you're talking about our adventures in Greyhawk when we actually have had quite a lot of adventures and traveling happening on ships. We haven't in the world of Mir almost at all. Some very
Well,
short.
that's what I mean. We only had that one adventure where we had a ship at some point because we were. That was the Firefly campaign, wasn't it?
Oh, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Now I know what you mean. Yeah, that part, except you were basically just going along the coast. You never
Yeah,
actually.
that's kind of what I meant. Like if we
Yeah,
turned left or right, how
yeah,
would our
exactly.
lives as adventurers been bad?
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, yeah, you stayed on the coast, and you, we've been a little bit into some of the bays, and it's all the ship journeys in Mir in the world in all those campaigns. None of them have been from one continent to another, and none of them have been really out to sea very far. Um,
Exactly.
so I did that because, in general, Mir is a very dangerous place filled with monsters, and there's lots of reasons for that. One is that the NPCs and the player characters are quite powerful, and they have to have things to challenge them, and the world is quite like the leaders of states are powerful, leaders of the factions are, and there has to be this balance in power for basically for it to be a functioning world, right? If that wasn't there, then one group would be dominating everything, and that's not happening yet in Mir. So there's a lot of different power sources, a lot of different powerful creatures, factions, and the oceans are just a part of that as well. And then the other reason I did that was because I wanted to have these worlds separate and evolve by themselves and try to find a way that it made sense. You had to think too of the elves. The elves have been in Mir for half a million years. But so why wouldn't they have just spread across the whole world? Well, this is the main reason. And actually, they have spread more than the other races because they've been out there so long. But there are not a lot of people traveling. And then when I did decide that there was going to be some migration from Zog to Mir at one point in the history for the humans, because those are the two main areas where they're humans, Zog and Mir. I had to find another reason of why that ended. So I made it even more dangerous. And what happened was the void was created in Zog, which is filled with undead creatures, which are on in the water and on the land.
Right,
So
right.
it was to give a really challenging world and one that's really fully alive, and that if you dare to travel from one continent to another on the oceans, it is an adventure. And this, now the Riftgate option is also another adventure because there's a lot of things that could happen with these portals. As I said, the way they're written in the book, there's a chart of all these things that can happen when you use them. They might work properly. You might end up somewhere else. A guardian might show up. Um, it's you could have a Seinfeld effect. Maybe I should put that in there, right? Like you smell like cheese, or um, you can only eat your peas one at a time now after going through this portal.
Well, I just see that there's a new monster book that needs to be done. Monsters of the Abyss or something, where
Right.
there are all these creatures that are running around in the oceans of Mir that are about to have a discussion with your mode of travel. Um,
Well, actually, that's funny you say that because there was somebody today on on the Kickstarter who said, you should do another book that has ocean creatures. We do have ocean creatures in the wilderness book. We have a whole chapter on them, but he said, no, go to town. Do we want more? And I know Travis would be really into that.
Well, I think it would be a great idea because, but hey, let's get the Myrr book out the door first, and then
Yeah,
uh, the next one, and then think about that down the road.
one thing at a
Um,
time.
exactly, because otherwise it'd be 17 Kickstarters running simultaneously, and you'll have a heart attack and keel over. Um, so basically, now with the void opening and all of those kinds of things happening, um, when people get this book, all of that will be explained, like in those kinds of things,
Oh yeah.
and also when you were building the world, when did the void come up? Was that sort of an idea at the beginning, or did that come later?
No, that came later because I just started out with the village in Mir, and then on the continent of Mir, which is the smallest continent in the whole world. So I knew that people had come to Mir from somewhere else. I knew that right away that this was a continent that people had migrated to at some point. So that was the and trying to remember. I think next I decided where the elves were from. So I made Nairn, which is another continent, and I'd always had a northern continent where this group of northerners had arrived, and then after that I decided on Zog. I remember actually first drawing it out, and just it's enormous compared to Mir where the humans moved to, and then I had to come up with a reason why haven't they continued to settle the area. So that's when I started to work on the void, and that ties into there's some really good elements that came with the humans from Zog to Mir, but there's also some sinister elements. So a noble family who have vampirism, and a family who's infected with lycanthropy, they also came and brought that those curses to Mir. So all of that and the void and all of that start to a lot of there's some decisions you make, and then there's some that kind of grow naturally and organically, and that whole void concept and everything grew out of what was naturally happening.
Speaking of the different sizes of continents, you have Mir was the first one you were developing, I assume.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, and but in terms of scale, sort of how did you establish that? Sorry, because you kind of look at Mir and how sort of big it is, and it's the smallest of the land masses. When you added the other ones, were you kind of thinking of I should make it bigger, or what kind of ideas about the scale of the entire world were you kind of thinking at the time?
I basically found dimensions for a small planet,
Okay.
and then just I already knew how big Mir was because I already had the map and I had the distances, and so then I put Mir onto this much larger map of this whole world, this whole planet, and then basically started drawing the other continents. I was doing this actually, I remember now, on my coffee break and lunch break when I was a teacher. And
That's awesome.
yeah, my desk was covered in maps. And eventually, what was going on there just outgrew my job, and I had to start a new job.
Well, it makes sense because I mean that's the nice thing about being able to build something like what you've created is that if you don't spend the time, if you don't actually, I mean, like I'm pretty sure that Tolkien wasn't, having to come home from his shift at 7-Eleven, to think, oh, I only have a few hours when I get home. I got kids and all that stuff.
Right.
Granted, he had the advantage of living in academia, but he had a job, and he had to do that stuff. And
Yeah.
luckily for him, he was able to probably spend time like you did. But eventually, he gave that up and decided, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, and history was made. But I mean, that's the thing where being able to involve your mind with that sort of focus take Mir and kind of expand upon it, and then okay, well, this is another continent. What's going to live here? And this is going to okay. Why are they not traveling? Okay, okay, we got the okay. How are they going to get anywhere? Okay, rifts. Okay, all right, cool. How do we control those? We'll make it a mystery. Like all of that kind of stuff sort of rattles around in your head, but it's only when you get to take the time to actually sit down and write it down and organize it in a way that makes sense. Um, it's an incredible thing to be able to do, and not a lot of people can do it. Tons of people have tried and not failed, but they realize how much work it is, and it's kind of like, yeah, I got to get back to the coal mine for
Yeah.
that 12-hour shift. I'll think about it later. That kind of thing. But so the scale was pretty bang on. Um, Now, creature wise, you've filled up the world now with all with how many creatures in total for
So
the
the
monster
ones from
series?
our books, there's 676 in the monster series. So all those creatures and their stories and everything will be in the world. The Phaland and Underworld monsters, we'll talk about connections because Phaland and the Underworld are connected to Mir. So those creatures will be there, but also many of those creatures that are in the Phaland and Underworld books, they're also in the world of Mir as well. And we'll actually in the book have a little footnote. Every time we mention a creature that's one of ours, we'll tell you what book it's from in the series. And then, of course, we'll have all the traditional creatures as well. So there's going to be your dragons and giants and orcs and goblins um, and then the few creatures that I'm not really a big fan of, they're not in there.
Well, you got to have your favorites. You got to have the ones
That's
your
right.
dislikes because there are some creatures that I kind of. Well, actually, what's your least favorite creature that you would
Well,
that would never darken the door of Mir ever?
it's not really that it's creatures that I just don't really see. I either, they don't really make sense to me or I don't see why I would need them. So one is the kobold because I feel if I have goblins and orcs, I've got evil humanoids kind of covered. And if I want a humanoid group that worships a dragon, I have lizard men. And then the gnoll, the hyena person, yeah, I think maybe it's partly that I'm from Africa and I know what hyenas are, and they're not a pleasant creature in any shape of, and to make a human version of it, like, yeah, no. So gnolls and kobolds, modrons. I don't know if you know what modrons are.
Woodron. Okay, I'm looking this up.
Yeah, so they're these constructs from another world, and to me, it doesn't really feel like a fantasy creature. It's more of a sci-fi creature.
Yeah, they're hideous and should never ever be used. Wow.
Yeah, and then of course the flump, the goofy, underdark, weird. They're well, partly, I don't need lots of. Well, I'm going to say I didn't need a lot of good monsters, although we publish more good monsters than anybody else ever has. Um, but I think they're cool. I do not think the flump is cool. um,
There's also that balance of those kinds of creatures have their time and place, and just looking at the Modron, I had forgotten all about that one. To me, that would be, I don't know, invasion from another dimension or something. So, another dimension can be all crazy and whatnot, and they would not be uh, at home in Mirror. But again, why? Like, they're just weird looking. So, oh, we've we've lost him. No, come back, Andrew. Come back. Well, hi. I don't know if he's coming back. I'm sure he will be. But yeah, creatures that don't fit, you don't have to use them. You can create your own. You can go out and support the monster series. You can dig deep into past creatures from D&D lore. Uh, so yeah, I certainly hope that you all come back soon. How about let's take a look at the Kickstarter. Let's see where we are at. because the Kickstarter is kind of important. Important? Important. So hang on one second. I'm gonna bring Andrew back. And Andrew's back. I was carrying the show, talking about all kinds of garbage. But you were saying sort of about. I was just saying about Modrons and how they
Right.
might fit in with some sort of thing. But I hate
Yeah,
them
no,
too.
I was saying that those kind of funny, goofy creatures, you know, and we've made our share of them for sure. Um, yeah, they're not always everybody's cup of tea, and you've got to decide which ones you want and which you don't. And those ones are not really my favorite. So there's a few things that I'm not really into, and dinosaurs in D&D, um, not really my thing. Although there are places for all these creatures that would work quite well. So that's in the book as well, in terms of all our monsters and then room for others. The other thing that makes Mir quite unique is that we've really built it like Greyhawk so that homebrew adventures can work well. So there's lots of space that GMs can have to still do their thing. And we've made really archetypal places and stories that really fit with those kind of adventures. So, a giant's adventure or the evil dragon or vampires or werewolf clan. Those sorts of things, we highlight them actually in the preview booklet, but in the final book, we'll make it even more clear and we'll give resources to help game masters so that it's easy to homebrew and mirror.
That's actually a really important feature, and as well in terms of the world. Um, you've made it completely open to not just D&D, but you're making it so that it's uh, oh my lord, my brain, open D&D kind of idea.
Yeah.
Um, is that now? Was that a part of the original thought, or was that because of everything happened earlier in the year?
That's evolved over time. No, for sure, that's changed over time. In fact, one thing I went through Mir and actually took out some of the kind of very 5e niche things. Like I took out Dragonborn, I took out Tieflings. So I tried to make it so that it was more open to any kind of RPG. And there are going to be very little mechanics at all in here. But it would be really useful for any system. And yeah, that definitely has evolved over time. And we made a decision early this year that we will make all our products for as many RPGs as possible. We're not going to just be 5e.
Does that mean that there might be future revisions of previous books, or some sort of addendum to them to make them to give people tips on how to make them more tabletop friendly to any system?
Well, that's a good question. The What we did with the dungeon book, which is about to be published, is that we've made tables for 5e stat blocks so you can easily change them to other systems, all the main mechanics. Pardon for the air filter that just decided to go off here.
I
So
was wondering what that was.
yeah, so yeah, we're gonna do that more and more, and people can use those and go back to the monster series and use them to convert monsters quite easily. And then we might make more resources for that as well. As far as going back and doing revisions of the book, we'll have to see. Considering we're such a small team, um, that's unlikely at this point, but I won't say no.
Well, no, it might happen in the future. I'm not thinking it would happen in a year or two. I'm thinking like 5 years down the road, especially with the evolution of all the tabletop gaming systems that have basically really sort of forced the revolution over the last sort of 10 months or so, uh, because of what was happening back in February with the Daddy
OGL.
D&D there,
Yeah.
Daddy D&D. But no, I think it's very cool that looking at Mir as a whole. I mean, having the just even just looking at it visually, and having the ideas where it's like, oh, I could do an adventure over here, I could do an adventure over there, and anyone can do that, which is very cool. Um, what would be a one now if you had one question left and you're standing in front of a room of 50,000 people who have all come and paid to listen to your wisdom? What is the sort of final word on why Mir is unique to other places?
Well, I'd say two things. I'd say Travis's amazing art. You know, a person today said, "Wow, it's kind of like the art from the Bone comic books," and
Yeah.
they said that's such a great kind of visual for a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. They'd never seen it before, so I think his art very unique, actually by a person and not AI. And he's also doing the graphic design and layout. I think his art is very unique, and it'll be nice to have it all by the same artist, which we've done with the monster books too. The other thing is all the detail. Like we're really going to make an effort to have the most detailed setting we can have. So, you know, you're going to learn all about the NPCs, and we talked about the monsters, the history. You're going to know the resources of an area, even of a village. You'll know, oh, you know, there's a lot of fishermen here. There's mines nearby. Oh, this town, they have clay, or this town, they have gemstones. Um, you know, you'll learn about the factions and the guards and the leaders. You know, there's going to be knighthoods and monk brotherhoods, thieves guilds, lots of different kinds of guilds. So the detail is going to be very, very specific, and it's going to cover the whole world. And I'm glad that I started 10 years ago, so I don't have a lot more to do.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to build these kinds of things. Like I mean it's your what do the kids say? It's your passion. Like these are things that have been cooking in your head for a long time, and they've come to life and are coming to life even more with the next World of Mirror book. So, you know, if you have not heard, if you're listening to us for the very first time, you don't know who the hell we are. The thing you should know is that there is a Kickstarter right now that is going on as we speak for the next 10, 10, the next 8 days. And it is over here. It is the World of Mirror campaign setting for any RGB. Well, I must be a nerd. You will note I'm a backer. I backed up here, right up here. I already got my pledge in. But we are at 88%. This has not moved for the last little bit. But there are definitely updates that have been coming out. A Mirror moment with Oswald. These are actually very cool. I've been enjoying them. But there's definitely a lot here that you could actually make your game better. You could have some fun and support a small publisher. Uh, don't forget, there's also the Monster series, which is way down here in the campaign list, where you can see monsters like this, where you can see creatures like that, where you can see a big, huge map like this and another creature there. So I definitely recommend supporting this particular event, this particular product, because it's important, and we all have to, support people that are not the big daddies, because as much as we love them and how much pleasure we've had from them over the years, uh, there's always room for other people to be in the market. So there you go. Any final words about the Kickstarter?
Well, just that we're going to do some giveaways as well over the next few days. So, to promote the Kickstarter and also to give away some of the Monster series, we'll have
Cool.
those running on our social media. So, people should look out for those as well.
And also next week, we'll be doing this a bit later in our day because we are going to close out the Kickstarter by talking about it, and hopefully, uh, people will push it over the edge if it isn't already. Which it'll be done by tomorrow. I mean, come on. When you think about it, these are great products. So Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of links down below that you can go and find out about the Kickstarter and everything about the publisher. And I hope you guys come back and subscribe and do all those fancy things. And, feel free to talk to us online. There's the podcast, there's the publishing. We're everywhere. We are not going away. So there you go. I'm very excited now. Can you tell? Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Later.